What do you like about being on the road?
I enjoy playing the music. I enjoy the crowds coming in and enjoying the music. Great energy exchange.
Willie Nelson, the legendary musician at the crossroads of reggae, techno, and country music, has received rave reviews for his spectacular live shows. Many people loved him because of his extraordinary theatrical presence and distinctive flair. Nonetheless, he struggled mightily with issues like addiction and bad decision-making throughout his career. How did his career suffer as a result of the bad decisions he made? Come with us as we uncover the truth behind Willie Nelson's terrible life and untimely demise. Now we may begin. Willie Nelson had a horrible life and conclusion, but before we get into that, it's important to know his background and how he rose to fame. Nearly a century ago, on April 29, 1933, in the little Texas town of Abbott, Willie Nelson came into this world. He had a hard time making ends meet in his early years due to financial difficulties, bad times, and a poor level of living. His family left Arkansas for Texas in 1929 in quest of a better life. The family history of Willie includes a blacksmith for a grandpa, a cotton processor for a grandma, and a mechanic for a father. They worked as a unit to support Willie and Bobby, their sister. People think Willie's mom left soon after he was born because the struggles were too much for her. Their grandfather took Willie and Bobby in after their father departed and remarried. This unfortunate turn of events really helped pave the way for Willie Nelson's illustrious career, so it wasn't all bad. The fact that Willie's grandparents were music teachers in Arkansas piqued their grandkids' interest in the subject. Although his sister Bobby was more renowned for her melodic abilities, Willie was already leading gospel hymns at the neighborhood church by the time he was 6 years old, thanks to a guitar that had been given to him by his grandpa. Tragically, Willie's grandfather died of pneumonia, which left a huge hole in Willie's heart. The loss of Willie's grandpa had a devastating effect on him. He often compared it to losing a piece of his heart. In addition to reigniting his sentiments of abandonment, this loss sharply highlighted his parents' absence. He had mastered enough guitar chords to play competently, and he used music as a means of coping with his loss. Willie wrote his first song when he was 7 years old, and he joined a local band called Bohemian Polka at 9 years old, playing guitar. Because of his humble origins, Willie showed early on that he was resilient and had a strong work ethic. When Willie was a little child, he helped put food on the table by working in the fields of Abbott, where cotton picking was a common summertime occupation. Nonetheless, he came to despise this duty and looked for alternative means of subsistence. Willie started singing at honky-tonks, dance halls, and pubs when he was 13 years old and kept doing so throughout high school. Along with developing his musical abilities, he was able to sustain himself through this. The early years of Willie Nelson were impacted by his parents' absence and financial struggle, but they also molded his tenacity and love of music. The groundwork for his legendary career was built throughout his childhood by his grandparents, who were musically oriented. Willie Nelson followed through on one of his life's finest choices. He got a degree, despite having a difficult childhood. Despite being born into a poor home, Willie never let that stop him. Abbott High School was the starting point of his educational career and the site of his lasting impact. Willie was a multi-sport superstar who also gave his all to his academics. He was a standout on 3 sports: football, halfback guard, basketball, important player, and baseball, shortstop. Willie maintained a healthy equilibrium between his schoolwork and his love of music. He was a guitarist for a Texas band that performed honky-tonks and even had a Sunday morning gig in Hillsboro. Additionally, Willie worked as a phone operator, cut trees for the local power company, pounded pigs with the Future Farmers of America, and even had a job at a pawn shop. His work ethic and demeanor were deeply influenced by these varied experiences. After finishing high school in 1950, Willie enlisted in the United States Army, the Air Force. His military career was cut short after just 9 months as a result of health problems. Willie kept going even after this setback. His first of 4 marriages to Martha Matthews took place by 1952. They were married for 10 years and had 3 kids. Attending Baylor University from 1954 to 1956, Willie studied agriculture and became a member of a fraternity. William kept working odd jobs even while he pursued further education, all in the name of finding contentment. He went on to try his hand at being a tree trimmer, a saddle maker, a nightclub bouncer, and an auto partsman. These roles failed to satisfy him, no matter how hard he tried. Willie Nelson's dedication to music was uncompromising, and he ultimately chose to leave his life behind in order to pursue his aspirations with all his heart. The turning point in his return to the music world came when he joined Johnny Bush's band. As time went on, Willie gradually started to regain his balance. At KPOB, Willie played the position of disc jockey when he wasn't enthralling crowds with his singing or playing guitar. Despite his lack of relevant expertise, this chance proved pivotal to his rapidly expanding career. The proprietor of the radio station saw Willie's enthusiasm and promise, so he hired him, which was a huge step toward his career. So, what gave Willie Nelson his fame, and what choices did he make that brought to his downfall? To discover out, continue watching. Willie Nelson experienced a major setback in 1955 when a local label, Sarge Records, declined to take his demo tapes. In the same year, he utilized the radio station's equipment to record his first two songs, The Storm Has Just Begun and When I've Sung My Last Hillbilly Song. Willie relocated to San Diego in search of better possibilities, but he had a hard time finding work. He continued on his journey to Portland, Oregon, anticipating his mother's arrival to collect him, in the hopes of starting over. But Willie's mother left him alone in a ditch and he spent the night there. He was forced to board a train to Eugene by daybreak. Lucky for him, Kay Van in Vancouver, Washington, recruited him in the end. With Leon Payne's Lumberjack on the flip side of his 1956 single No Place for Me, he attempted a failed single. Willie persisted in his career as a radio host and continued to play in Vancouver nightclubs despite this setback. Aspiring for the top reward, he frequently sung at a Colorado nightclub. His son Billy's birth in 1958 brought a ray of optimism. In pursuit of a more favorable situation, the family relocated to Houston, Texas. While on the road, Willie met Larry Butler at the Esquire Ballroom to sell Butler some of his own music. Despite Butler's refusal to part with $10 for the song, he extended a $50 apartment rental loan to Willie. Willie took out the loan, and now he and his family live in Pasadena, Texas, not far from Houston. He also has a job as a sign-on DJ at a radio station in the area. There were two singles made by Willie during this period, Man with the Blues and What a Way to Live, Misery Mansion. Things started to look up when Paul Buskirk, a guitar teacher, recruited Willie to work at his music school. Both Family Bible and Nightlife, two of Willie's recordings, were subsequently sold to Buskirk by him for $50 and $150 respectively. Willie Nelson finally got the break he needed in 1960, when his song Family Bible became popular. From the time he recorded his first songs and encountered rejection until the time he achieved fame with Family Bible, Willie's path exemplifies his perseverance and steadfast dedication to his music. Willie Nelson uprooted his life and headed to Nashville, Tennessee in 1960 to pursue a career in music. But he had a hard time finding a record company that would sign him. Regardless, Willie persisted and eventually found himself in the same nightclubs and pubs where famous artists and actors congregated. Here is where Willie's luck started to turn around. Cochran, a renowned songwriter for Pamper Music, noticed Willie's exceptional skill while they were jamming. Cochran was so impressed with Willie Nelson that he convinced Smith to pay him more so that he could sign with Pamper Music. Hearing Willie play Hello Walls at Tootsie's Orchid Lounge was a watershed moment in Farron Young's life. After hearing the song, Young felt compelled to record it himself. Thanks to this exposure, Willie was able to work with legendary musicians like Patsy Cline and Ray Price. Many other musicians found success by covering Willie's tunes. The marriage of Patsy Cline to Charlie Dick, who happened to hear Willie's song on a jukebox, is a prime example. Curious, he sought out further information from Willie. One of the most successful jukebox singles of all time was Crazy, which Willie played him as a demo. Patsy Cline eventually recorded the song. Liberty Records noticed Willie's potential in August 1961 and signed him. Two of Willie's first singles were released in the next year. One reached #1 on the charts, while the other made it into the top 10. After a productive run with Liberty Records, he finally had his debut album, And Then I Wrote, released in September 1962. Willie's music was captivating because it was unique, combining guitar with jazz rhythms and lyrics that were not like anybody else's. The path that Willie took was characterized by tenacity and dogged determination. He was a master performer in addition to being a gifted lyricist. Shirley Collie became Willie's second wife in 1963, and the ceremony took place in Sin City. At about the same time, he started working at Pamper Music's coastal offices, although he rarely had time to play music due to all the responsibilities of his employment. As a result, he chose to leave and pursue a life of tranquility on a ranch outside of Nashville. In 1964, Willie's career took a significant leap forward when Monument Records' Fred Foster signed him. This led to the publication of the single, I Never Cared for You. By the year's end, Willie had obtained a lucrative deal for $10,000 per year, which would translate to almost $100,000 in 2024. A reflection of Willie's developing success and persistent brilliance, this huge agreement was a watershed moment in his career. Willie Nelson's career was in shambles by 1970. He had stopped turning a profit since he was investing all of his songwriting earnings into fruitless tours. In 1970, he added insult to injury by divorcing Shirley Collie, his second wife. Tragically, he learned at the year's conclusion that his ranch had burned down, adding insult to injury. After realizing he needed a major shift, he set out to get it. A Ray of Optimism, his 1971 song I'm a Memory, cracked the top 30 and offered a hopeful message. Nevertheless, the increased impetus did not last. The record company RCA Records made an urgent request of Willie in 1972, threatening to shelve his tracks permanently unless he renewed his contract early. This additional stress made him feel like he was about to collapse under the weight of his problems. Despondent and overwhelmed, Willie Nelson sunk to a low point, to the point that he lay down on the road, expecting that a passing automobile would crush him. Martha, his first wife, left him because of all the fighting and how much he drank. When Shirley found out he had a kid from a previous relationship with Connie, she filed for a divorce. Because he had nowhere else to go, Willie took up residence with Connie and their infant daughter Paula. After realizing he had little chance of making it as a musician, he decided to call it quits. If you stick it out through the bad times, you may emerge stronger than before, just like Willie Nelson did. Nelson relocated to Austin, Texas, after opting to leave the music industry. In the midst of the exciting hippie music scene, he discovered a newfound optimism and vitality. The Dripping Springs Reunion was a 3-day country music festival that organizers hoped would become an annual event. On the last day, Willie Nelson played. Despite the festival's underwhelming turnout, Nelson was so moved by the idea that he decided to start his own annual event, the 4th of July Picnic, the year after. Nelson, who was hell-bent on getting back into the music industry, enlisted the help of manager Neil Reshen to mediate with record label RCA. Reshen was able to get RCA to cancel Nelson's contract and pay back $14,000 because to his negotiation skills. Now that this was out of the way, Nelson could become Atlantic Records' first country singer and sign a new deal with the label for $25,000 a year. Nelson, now at liberty to do as he pleased, started writing songs for his upcoming album and created a band named The Family. He had already begun recording Shotgun Willie at New York City's Atlantic Studios in February 1973, when the album had already received widespread praise. Commercially, the album was a bust, even though it was critically acclaimed and generated a lot of hype in the music industry. People joked that Nelson cleared his throat and found his real voice with Shotgun Willie, since it was a huge step forward in his musical approach. During this time, Willie Nelson underwent a profound transformation. An outstanding record, Shotgun Willie, has an intriguing history that is based on Willie Nelson's life events. The tale begins with the marriage of Nelson's daughter to Steve. Even though Nelson tried to reason with Steve several times, Steve would not budge, and Steve was a constant source of problems. After Nelson tried to reason with Steve again, Steve shot at his house one day. Nelson, who was notoriously intolerable of such conduct, drew his shotgun and returned fire. Once again, the shotgun came in handy when Steve abducted Nelson's youngster. As a result of these events, Willie Nelson became known as Shotgun Willie. As the 1970s progressed, Nelson's fame skyrocketed, and he made the decision to pursue acting professionally. Having said that, Nelson possessed far more musical genius to impart prior to this change. His subsequent album, Phases and Stages, was out in 1974. In this album, Nelson uses his personal experiences to portray the tale of a married couple's divorce. The record is divided down the middle so that listeners may hear the man's and woman's points of view. The album included the well-known song Bloody Mary Morning. As if fueled by a magical elixir, Willie Nelson harnessed incredible energy and produced and starred in the pilot episode of PBS's Austin City Limits that same year. He then signed with Columbia Records, securing a deal that gave him complete creative freedom thanks to the success of his previous albums. This freedom led to the creation of his famous 1975 album, Red-Headed Stranger, which was adored by both critics and fans. Despite Columbia Records' initial hesitation about releasing an album dominated by guitar and piano, Nelson and Waylon Jennings pushed for its release. The album featured the #1 hit, Blue Eyes, Crying in the Rain, a cover of Fred Rose's song which had already been released as a single. During his 1975 tour, Nelson supported PBS stations in the South, promoting Austin City Limits. The pilot first aired on these stations and then nationwide, leading PBS to order 10 more episodes in 1976, officially launching the show. In the early 1970s, country music was dominated by Jennings and Nelson, who were known as outlaw country due to their rebellious style that went against the grain of traditional Nashville sound. In 1976, they released Wanted the Outlaws, which included Jennings, Jesse Coulter, and Tom Paul Glazer. The album solidified their outlaw reputation and became the first country album to achieve platinum status. Nelson also released The Sound in Your Mind that year, which went gold in 1978 and platinum in 2001. He also released his first gospel album, Troublemaker, which went gold in 1986. Throughout the late 1970s, Nelson continued to enjoy chart success with hit songs like Good-Hearted Woman, Remember Me, If You've Got the Money, I've Got the Time, and Uncloudy Day. Many political and social issues have received Willie Nelson's endorsement during his career. He's been on the side of animal rights groups like the ALA and the South Central Farm neighborhood in Los Angeles. With the 2006 release of a popular cover of Cowboys Are Frequently Secretly Fond of Each Other and his endorsement of same-sex marriage, Nelson has been an outspoken supporter of the LGBT community. His political activism includes backing Texan Beto O'Rourke and speaking out against the Trump administration's family separation policy. As his performance of Vote 'Em Out to encourage political change demonstrates, Nelson's advocacy is not limited to his music. Many fights over health. In his latter years as a singer, Willie Nelson struggled with a lot of health issues, which were generally associated with his bad lifestyle choices, especially his marijuana addiction. This was despite the fact that he had a great stage presence. Nelson had a collapsed lung in 1981 while swimming in Hawaii, which caused him to cancel his show there. Nelson smoked 2 or 3 packs of cigarettes daily, which led to his pneumonia, despite medical recommendations to temporarily cease. He gave up smoking cigarettes after suffering from pneumonia on many occasions. Nonetheless, in 2008, he began using marijuana as a smoke-free substitute. This decision, however, brought attention to the severity of Nelson's drug usage by raising worries about the possible dangers of excessive marijuana use. Carpal tunnel syndrome, made worse by Willie Nelson's heavy guitar playing, was one of his health issues that required surgery. Another was his notorious smoking habit. There would have been no performances as planned, as Nelson had to rest from playing guitar after surgery. He showed his adaptability and agility in the music industry by shifting his concentration to songwriting despite this setback. In 2012, while performing in Denver at a benefit, Nelson had yet another health setback. His breathing became difficult due to the combination of high altitude and emphysema, and he was admitted to the hospital without delay. The good news is that Elaine Schock, Nelson's publicist, has told the public that he is responding well to therapy and is getting ready for his next performance in Dallas, Texas. In 2015, Nelson decided to undergo stem cell treatment for his lungs after suffering from many bouts of pneumonia and emphysema. This move demonstrated his unwavering resolve to conquer health obstacles and carry on with his music career. In the midst of his already turbulent existence, Willie Nelson encountered another devastating challenge when he received a tax bill of an astounding $32 million. His manager, Reshan, racked up a growing debt to the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, after failing to pay them in 1976 while requesting tax extensions, according to the Discovery. Nelson was caught unawares by the actual magnitude of the financial load, since he had originally estimated the debt to be only $200,000. Nelson, who was facing the impending doom of bankruptcy, fought back against hopelessness by choosing to have an optimistic mindset. Annie D'Angelo, whom he wed in the midst of the financial crisis, was a rock for him and his family during this difficult time. Their fortune was drained by the mountain of debt, but their relationship was unwavering, a symbol of strength in the face of hardship. It wasn't until Nelson started selling off his valuables to pay off his debt that his family and fans learned about his hardship. Amazingly, though, his friends, family, and fans came together at the auction to buy the things again and give them back to Nelson, demonstrating the power of unity and unfaltering commitment in the face of adversity. Willie Nelson's history of heavy smoking put him in a lot of sticky situations, including many run-ins with the authorities that resulted in jail time. As early as 1974 in Dallas, Texas, Nelson was already facing several possession charges because to his penchant for the drug. Nelson got himself into another jam in the Bahamas in 1977, only 3 years after his first run-in. A slew of misfortunes befell Nelson after his tour with Hank Cochran, who he had accompanied to the Bahamas. Because of their delayed arrival at the airport, Nelson and Cochran were able to leave without their bags, which were subsequently handed to them. However, customs officers found marijuana hidden in Nelson's trousers during their possession recovery, leading to his swift arrest and incarceration. In the midst of Nelson's incarceration, his pal Cochran toiled away at getting him released on bond. After Nelson was released, Cochran even brought a six-pack of beer to share in an effort to cheer him up. Nelson was in the midst of his exuberance when he tripped and fell, sending him to the emergency department and dampening the celebratory atmosphere. Regardless, Nelson got up from his fall and went before a judge, who eventually dropped all accusations against him. But the judge was quite serious, and he barred Nelson from the Bahamas for life. It seemed like Willie Nelson had not completely grown up after his prior encounters with the police and the repercussions they brought. When Texas highway patrolmen found marijuana in Nelson's vehicle in Waco, Texas in 1994, he suffered yet another setback. He missed out on the chance to win a Grammy that year because he had to attend the ceremony early due to an upcoming court appearance. When Nelson returned to W in 2006, his problems had reappeared. Funeral services for Richard held at St. Martin Parish, Mississippi. The charges against Nelson include possession of marijuana and hallucinogenic mushrooms, which he faced alongside his sister Bobby and manager. Nelson was sentenced to 6 months of probation after the trial. On November 26, 2010, Nelson was once again embroiled in legal issues, continuing the story. As Nelson made his way back to Texas from Los Angeles, his tour bus was pulled up near Sierra Blanca, Texas, and 6 ounces of marijuana were found on board by the authorities. The prosecutor, Kit Bramlett, was hesitant to sentence Nelson to prison since the amount of marijuana involved was so minor, even if charges were filed against him. Instead, the judge ordered Nelson to perform Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain as a condition of his release from jail and fined him $100. His bail was set at $2,500. Judge Becky Dean Walker, however, stepped in and said that Nelson was not obligated to sing the song, despite Bramlett's recommendation to the contrary. Joe Turner, who was representing Nelson, subsequently worked out a plea bargain with the prosecution to get his sentence reduced. The deal called for a 30-day review period and a $500 fee from Nelson to escape a 2-year prison term. But the court turned down the deal because he was afraid it showed partiality to the famous. According to Bramlett, a 1-year jail term was the usual for Nelson's offense. Thus, the case might go to dismissal or a different judge's judgment. Covers by Willie Nelson of songs by the Allman Brothers, such as Midnight Rider for the film Electric Horseman and On the Road Again for the film Honeysuckle Rose, were among the many hit singles issued by Nelson in the late 1980s. Throughout this decade, Nelson was heavily involved in duets and collaborations with other famous singers and songwriters, including Julio Iglesias on the song To All the Girls I've Loved Before. While pursuing his musical career, Nelson's personal life took a dramatic turn in 1986 on the set of the film Stagecoach when he met Annie D'Angelo. When Nelson was requested to change his look for a part, it was as if the stars aligned, and he ended up meeting D'Angelo. Their encounter was the first chapter of a love tale characterized by adoration and respect for one another. Willie Nelson is an iconic American who overcame many obstacles on his way from obscurity to fame, changing the face of music and having an impact on issues all over the world. Nelson's music has a distinct sound that combines country with jazz, pop, blues, rock, and folk. His off-center phrasing, casual vocal style, and unique guitar playing have given him tremendous appeal and established him as a major figure in country music. Over the years, Nelson has been showered with praise and awards for his tremendous accomplishments. As a legend in the country music genre, he was justifiably elected into the hallowed Country Music Hall of Fame in 1993. After 5 years, in 1998, Nelson received the prestigious Kennedy Center Honors, a recognition of his significant influence on American society and culture. In 2011, he was honored for his contribution to causes such as Farm Aid by his admission into the National Agricultural Hall of Fame, which further demonstrated his commitment to charity and advocacy for farmers. In 2015, Nelson received the Gershwin Prize, the most distinguished lifetime achievement honor bestowed by the Library of Congress, for his remarkable contributions to American music and culture, adding another feather to his already impressive professional cap. The 2018 admission into the Texas Institute of Letters further cemented Nelson's position among the literary giants of his native state and recognized his skill as a songwriter. Members of Nelson's touring and recording ensemble, The Family, have been there for the whole of his musical career, contributing to the development of his sound and providing invaluable stage accompaniment. His sister Bobby Nelson, Paul English, drummer, Mickey Raphael, harmonist, B. Spears, bassist, Billy English, drummer and percussionist, and Jody Payne, guitarist, were the original members of the band. Several members of the original lineup have passed away over the years, leaving just Nelson, Raphael, and Billy English. On spite of the setbacks, Nelson's still leading the Willie and Family Band on North American tours on the biodiesel bus Honeysuckle Rose, which is powered by Bio Willie, the firm that Nelson owns. As proof of his resiliency and unfaltering commitment to his art and causes he loves, he is the oldest and longest-living member of the Family Band. Is Willie Nelson someone you like? In your opinion, is Willie Nelson capable of making amends? Post your opinions in the space provided. We appreciate you taking the time to view this movie and we hope you enjoyed it. To read the latest celebrity news, simply tap the link that appears on your screen. Looking forward to seeing you.